I will have to see the data in order to really understand it.
And I think a big factor is the mortality rate. We're talking about the mortality rate. You know, when we first started, people were thinking about 3 and 4%, and now we're talking about a much lower number than that. I think it's a number that will be a lot different than people thought.
The mortality rate is driven almost exclusively, as we have talked about, by people with conditions and older. So that has become, from the very beginning, that was our emphasis. You know, when we started 2 or 3 weeks ago talking with one another, our focus has been those with pre-existing conditions and the elderly. And I think these steps were about protecting with pre-existing conditions. So the whole key to changing the mortality rates is not just the hospital care, but preventing them from going into the hospital to begin with, because you don't want them to be infected.
But it's much lower than we originally thought. I mean, frankly.
Yes.
It's a lot
Do you have
lower.
an estimate? Do you have a number?
Well, you know what the estimate in Wuhan was originally? It was over 3%. When they look outside of Wuhan, it was about 0.7%. It depends very much. In South Korea, it was about 0.7, 0.8%. But I don't want, that's like a tyranny of averages. And that's not having, that's probably missing 50, 60% of the data because no one was testing asymptomatics. Remember, in every country, you had to be symptomatic to get a test. So we're making case fatality rates when we're missing a significant part of the data. So if anything, it will go lower, but I don't want people, that should not be reassuring because the death rates escalate with age and pre-existing conditions. So I really want to be clear that although it may be very low if you're under 40 or very low if you're under 50 and very low if you're under 70, there is an inflection curve. The average age of the person who's dying in Italy is in the mid-80s. So there is really a significant issue in our older generation that we feel strongly about protecting.
But Dr., it's just very interesting, the whole thing. It's an incredible subject. When somebody is very sick, they go to a doctor, go to a hospital, they're recorded, they're very sick, and then they live or they don't live, see what happens. But when somebody isn't very sick at all, I've heard people that they don't even know they had it and they're healing. Then I've heard people they have like a cold or they have a running nose, or even people that stay home and they think they have the flu, or in some cases they think they have a really bad case of the flu. But all of those people, that vast majority of, beyond vast majority of people, they're not reporting. They're not calling the doctor. They're not calling him. They're just getting better. So you would think it would have to be because the people that are sick are going to a doctor or they're going someplace and they're going to say, make me better. The people that are just short of that and people that aren't even, we have many people where they literally don't even know that they have it. So now you're building up the number of cases that we talked about before, and yet, so you don't know you don't know how many there are. It could be a vast number. But what you do know is all the people that are really sick, because all of the people that are really sick are going to a doctor in some form, and the doctor is reporting it in all cases. So,
but that's why your question about the antibody test is so critical, because that will give us really a much better baseline to really understand.
So Mr. President, when you talk...
And as I said, one of the things that has really gotten me thinking about this, number one, I'm looking at what's going on, and life is fragile, and economies are fragile, but one of the things is the mortality rate, John. When we first started this, nobody knew anything about this particular virus. Very, very little. We started off, we were hearing numbers of 5%. That's an astronomical number when the flu is 0.001 and 2 and 3, right? And so 5% would be an astronomical number. Now we're seeing numbers that may be less than 1, and that's not including the exercise that I just went through where many people don't report. So everybody getting very sick is reporting, but nobody getting, not very sick. And that should be part of that equation. So that just keeps reducing the number. So The mortality rate is that's a big, to me, that's a very big factor. When we were hearing 3 and 4%, remember we had one day where we thought it was 5%, and we were getting a lot of bad numbers from, I don't know why, but we were getting a lot of bad numbers. I do wish, again, our relationship's very good with China, but I wish they could have told us about this a little bit sooner, you know that. But it's still terrible. It's still the whole thing. The whole concept of death is terrible. But there's a tremendous difference between something under 1% and 4 or 5 or even 3%. So that's something that we're learning now. And I think the number may be lower than people think because of what I.
Mr. President, have you instructed Secretary Mnuchin and the others working on this bill with Congress to meet some of the demands that Democrats